On this week's episode, we're going to talk about what else? Barbenheimer. Yes, I've been converted. I know. We'll go with the masses and call it Barbenheimer, and we'll talk about these two movies on this week's episode. You're listening to Where We Are. You are listening to Where We Are. We are the Wheres. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
And Melissa kind of lied in the opener of the episode. We're not just talking a Barbenheimer. We're talking Barbenheimer.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah, you like that?
Barbenheimer.
Barbenheimer. I think it works.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so, we've had a great week. Anniversary. We're taking a little trip this weekend, which should be great. But the main real update in our lives is that it's been a great entertainment week. Mm-hmm. We finished The Bear.
Second season.
We did the double feature last night.
Yeah, we saw Oppenheimer and then Barbie.
Which I think is the way to do it.
Yeah, everybody's arguing the opposite, and I don't no.
No, for sure, no. I mean, maybe if you're, like 18 and have had like 8 coffees, and you just are, no, I think it's not that Oppenheimer's boring. It's just,
it's 3 hours.
It's 3 hours. You're going to want stamina for Oppenheimer, and then Barbie flies by after you've seen Oppenheimer.
It
like
does.
I was just like, whoa, this is the pacing of this is incredible. So let's talk about first. I do just want to talk about The Bear.
Yeah,
which has everything I love. Mm-hmm. Italians, cooking. Chicago. I love Chicago.
Rust Belt sensibilities.
A really cute, heartbreaking love story.
Multiple love stories, really.
True. Wow, that's deep, Melissa.
Thank you.
But Melissa, why? I mean, so I think we overlap on what we watch quite a bit. I know some couples where like they don't watch anything together. We do. There are some shows I watch that you won't watch, and some shows you watch. But like in the premium, and I know The Bear is FX, but like in the premium sort of drama, we probably like 80% will watch together. Like there's good overlap there, but why? But The Bear, like you really like picked up on it early on. Like you were wanting to stay up, watch episode. What did you like about The Bear?
I like the pacing. I like that the episodes can be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And I really like, because I don't like cooking, and I think that cooking is such an art, and I think that when you get to the Michelin star level, the world's top 50 level, that it is breathtaking, super interesting, high stakes, high pressure. And they tried to bring this into a little Chicago restaurant called The Beef that is a family legacy, that it's handed down from the main character. His name is Carmi, or Carmen, from his brother who died by suicide. And so this Carmi, he is a world-renowned chef, highly trained. They, in the show, they talk about, several of the big names. They allude to like the kitchens of Alinea in Chicago,
11 Madison Park,
Noma, which was in the Netherlands or Denmark.
Yeah,
Denmark, which is closing actually, which is unfortunate. But I love the world of Michelin star cooking, and so it kind of brings you into that. And so far, I mean, the show is so memeable. You hear people saying, "Yes, chef," or "cousin." Like, just these things, like, if you watch it, like, you'll immediately know exactly what we're talking about within the first 10 minutes. But the other thing about it that I love is that I did not grow up in an Italian American family, but I started dating you at 16. So I got sort of thrown into it pretty early in my life. And the show depicts an Italian American family like with a lot of accuracy. You know, not saying that all Italian American families are monoliths, especially because this particular Italian American family
Has
that
a
is
lot of
depicted has a
problems.
lot of problems. But I identify with a lot of it. The Rust Belt sensibilities I really identify with in it, especially with like working class issues. Like that's sort of intertwined throughout. And then the Catholic identity of the family at hand, that in the first season, it's always quietly in the background. And like the imagery of Catholicism, there's little references, and then as you get into the second season, because we don't want to give away any spoilers, especially for folks who are still on the first season or haven't even started, it becomes even more explicit as you go on. There is an episode in the second season that depicts a Christmas dinner, Feast of the Seven Fishes. That episode is probably one of the most masterful episodes I've ever seen in my life.
It's going to win all the Emmys.
And then the episode after it is pretty much just as masterful, which I could not believe that a TV show 2 episodes in a row could do something so well. But the Catholicism in that 6th episode in the second season is just interspersed throughout, and it kind of just shows like the ebb and flow of like a family that grew up Catholic that has it sort of in the background, but also seems to be a foundation for them and a comfort for them, and a culture for them. I really love when TV shows handle the many different ways that religiosity can look,
but
in families across the U.S.
I sense, Melissa, like a real hesitancy to stare Christianity right in the face.
Yes.
So it's like in the backdrop, but because of the layers of trauma the family has gone through, it is like a comfort, but a comfort that they don't want to get too close to. It's Bridget Rita wrote a wonderful piece for America Magazine on Catholic imagery in The Bear. I would urge folks to check it out. I'd say the other religion pieces, he attends an AA meeting.
Yeah, and it's always in a church. It always shows him walking into a church.
And that was a big, interestingly, like that was kind of a big Willard point. Willard admired AA quite a bit, but he said AA was only necessary because that kind of work could no longer take place, generally speaking, in the church. And so AA had to be created because the local church, in so many instances, had become the kind of place that actually disincentivizes people being honest about what they're struggling with. Disincentivizes sort of. So that's, I guess, just a bit of an aside. But yeah, it's a great show. I mean, it is a lot of some combination of it being kitchen and the background. There's a lot of vulgarity in the show.
Yes.
And so I think with sensitivities there, I do think it's a wonderful wonderful show. I can't wait for the 3rd season.
I know, me too.
And so would kind of with everything we're talking about on the show, one of the reasons we're talking about it is because we can't wait to hear what you all think of all this. So what do you think about The Bear? Let us know on social media or send us an email. Let us know at whereweare.substack.com. Melissa, Barbenheimer is fresh on our minds. We saw it last night. Mm-hmm. It's just one it's just one thing. We saw Barbenheimer last night. We saw both movies last night. let's talk Oppenheimer.
Okay.
I've been waiting for this movie to come out for a long time. I, as we both do, care about nukes quite a bit. We've both learned a lot from our friend Tyler Wig Stevenson, previous guest on the
Yep,
pod.
on episode 11.
On episode 11, I recently joined the board of Plowshares, which is an organization with the mission to see the reduction and eventual elimination of nuclear weapons. So I was anticipating this movie and looking forward to it. We also love Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, I really love Christopher Nolan.
We're going to try and avoid spoilers here.
Yes.
So we'll do the best to avoid spoilers. But Melissa, maybe give a bit of a rundown and a few reflections. And then I have a couple things that I've been thinking about that we didn't discuss. They'll be new to you that we didn't discuss right after we saw the movie. Yeah. But what stuck out to you? What did you think?
Yeah, I felt like, because Nolan based this movie off of a book on Oppenheimer, J. Robert Oppenheimer, who, if you look in any history book, for U.S. history, or, you take an international relations course, you learn about this guy as the father of the nuclear weapon. He was basically the project manager of the Manhattan Project, which was based in Los Alamos, New Mexico, during the 40s, during World War II, right when World War II was sort of coming to an end after Hitler had died, but the United States and Japan were still at odds with one another. And Oppenheimer was a physicist. They say that he was a brilliant physicist. And so Nolan switches back between, as he is kind of sort of obsessed with, he tells the story not in sort of linear time, and he uses color and sound in really interesting ways to present Oppenheimer's sort of timeline between being an early physicist in Europe to transferring to the United States, where the type of work that he was doing was not being done in the United States, and then to the point where he joins basically the U.S. military in order to build the first atomic weapon in a race with Germany, and then all of the fallout way after the first two bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the 50s, where his security clearance was revoked because of his ties to the Communist Party in the United States. So it follows that trajectory on various timelines, which is super interesting. I always really like when Nolan does that, but I do know that a lot of people don't like that. And I hope that I don't think I've given away much there.
No.
But that's a basic synopsis. So we know where we're going here. And, with the trailer, I really didn't know what to expect with the film. Like, what
totally.
the perspective was that Nolan was going to take, like who Oppenheimer was, but really the sort of morality and the ethics behind the work that Oppenheimer was ultimately responsible for, and that the United States, the president, the military was responsible for when they did drop the two bombs in the fort and right at the end to end World War II. And I think decidedly that Oppenheimer is presented as somebody who, I think one of the most interesting things that Nolan did was sort of take the idea that scientists during this time, previously with like in the Einstein era, so like the 1900s, I mean, you've probably seen a bunch of different movies that cover the various famous people who founded, new mathematical problems or new theorems, or, invented huge things that, really changed the trajectory of some kind of industry. That Oppenheimer was a theoretical physicist, so he worked really on theory and on ideas. And Nolan takes, no pun intended, this idea that Oppenheimer working solely on ideas and then actually bringing it to the real world was just, Nolan is interviewed as saying it's naive, but in the end, Nolan, I think, also makes the decision to present Oppenheimer as somebody who was responsible for what happened, who made very bad choices by actually taking things further, in terms of saying, okay, yes, let's be in an arms race with Germany to build this atomic weapon. I can help you do it. I'll be your project lead, kind of thing. I found that to be very interesting. I think it's the right choice to make. But this sort of theme around what do ideas do and how dangerous are ideas, and this idea that when you sort of spend all of your time in theory, once that theory hits the real world, it has real world consequences. And to be constantly giddy around your ideas, you know, sort of, and come what may, who cares, as long as I get to test out, you know, these theories that I've been working on. Like, that's the sort of like feeling that he puts behind the beginning of the film that I found to be pretty profound and pretty accurate to, I think, a lot of the worst inventions that we've had in human history, and a lot of like the worst movements in history, around how a lot of the times it's from just one idea or a few ideas. A bunch of people say yes to it and don't really care to think about the consequences until things have happened. And that's sort of where Nolan takes you to and has you sit in as the viewer.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, and you know, this gets into the movie maybe a bit too much. I don't think it's a matter of. I think there are multiple points along the way in which the ethical considerations do come up. Oppenheimer takes. He's clearly cognizant the whole way through. I don't think there's a who cares kind of attitude. Here's one of the things that What word would you say is said more than any other word in that movie?
Oh, that's a good question.
Compartmentalize.
Oh, yes.
And it comes up
You're
every
right.
single
Yes,
time
yes.
in the context of security procedures at Los Alamos. That you know, everyone shouldn't know everything. You know, on a need to know basis. You know, information has to be quarantined off, etc., etc. Nolan uses the word so much that today I just could not help but think he meant something else with that. There's no way why it should be such a central idea, and I think it's a double entendre. I think, well, so much of the movie focuses on this compartmentalization as a security measure from others, from the Russians or the Germans, sort of getting information. The real way, the other security measure was everyone involved in making the bomb has to compartmentalize their role. Because if they think about the project as a whole, if they think about it as this is obviously where it's going, then they'd have a culpability that they so avoid taking throughout the whole thing. And so at several times, and usually it's when, rarely is it said in a convincing way, it's usually as a last-ditch sort of effort, like Oppenheimer will say, you know, it's not our role to decide what happens with this. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility was sort of this part, and it's others. And now, of course, he doesn't act like that. He spends a lot of his life and career trying to influence policy decision. But I do think that double entendre of compartmentalization and almost like watching the movie again with that in mind would be an interesting thing. The second thing, which is I have 3 points. The second point, which is basically what you were saying, which is the momentum that ideas have. the complete inability of the policymakers, of the scientists, of anyone involved to pump the brakes. Mm-hmm. It was like once it was conceived that this was possible, the rest was rationalization. Mm-hmm. And so there's discussion, after Germany's defeated. Well, should we stop now? The whole justification was, yes, this is evil, but there's a great line that's in the trailer, so I don't feel like I'm. At one point, Oppenheimer says, "Look, I don't know if America can be trusted with the bomb, but I know the Nazis can't be."
Yep. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, just this idea of momentum, the inevitability, seemingly, of technology, and obviously, I think about that. Obviously, in the context of the nuke, as we discussed last night, the bomb depicted in Oppenheimer is magnitudes less powerful than the bombs than the nukes that we have today.
Yes.
But I also think about it in the context of AI, and think about it.
Trust me.
So like so the sort of, and I actually think viewing those kinds of technological developments through the lens of Oppenheimer and the nuke is helpful, because with AI there's so much muddying of the waters. Well, we don't know what's really going to happen. It's going to help some industries. Yeah, it's going to harm some others. But like with a bomb, usually people have enough sense that the arguments that, this is going to be a positive thing, which are made, that, this will be a deterrent, and there's a great exchange in the movie. I won't relay here on that point. But generally, people understand, like the idea that there's a better chance of this working out well. Like they felt forced to do it, but it was not. They could not convince themselves, like, this is going to be like amazing. Except, some characters do convince themselves of that, and we'll leave that. Here's the third point I want to make.
Okay.
There's, without getting too into details, there is there's a plot line of sort of corruption and misuse of power.
Yes.
Now, I think what's odd is that it plays out in the government arena. However, and so I think it's easy for people to say, people will watch this movie and say how dirty politics is. How, this is just one more example of these politicians are all, awful people. They're all out for themselves, et cetera, et cetera. But none of the people involved are first and foremost, none of the central actors, none of the central figures involved are principally political figures. They're in science, which is supposed to be this unassailable sort of, no, science, we just go based on the evidence and research. And if, in other words, I think the movie has as much of a condemnation for science as it does for politics, if not more for science. So many of the scientific processes are gamed. There's so much like small p politics in whose ideas are able to prevail, who wins like faculty, disagreements. And I think I think a lot of people are going to miss that. I think a lot of people are going to read they're going to read the small p politics stuff as government, politicians, policymakers being self-interested. You watch this movie with the idea that and I'm not trying to, this isn't science is the worst. I think what it is A, politics is not the only arena where this stuff happens, and B, that it's human nature. It can't. It is what we see play out in human relations, and one of the reasons why we so often attribute it to politics is that politics is such a fundamentally human endeavor.
Yeah.
But watch this movie intentionally keeping in mind that this is academia, this is science. Yes, there are some government folks involved, but I think that's a really incisive aspect of the film.
Yeah, I think I don't think what I sort of discussed at the beginning was as articulate as I could have made it, because that third point is kind of what I was starting to try to get at, but I don't think I had fully formed in my head, is that Nolan really focused in on the ivory tower here at the beginning and the kind of arms race that happens in academia around ideas.
Yeah.
And this arms race to be published, to be the first to be published, to get to the idea first, to have an original idea, which it's very funny at that whole point of where there is like the sort of race to, can there actually be a bomb? Who's actually solved the math problem that it takes to even jump into actually being able to create the bomb and enrich the uranium or plutonium? It reminded me of A Beautiful Mind, where the entire, that's a Ron Howard film, came out in 2003, starring Russell Crowe, and the entire motif behind that film was John Nash, who created game theory, widely used, changed the industry,
changed multiple
industries, idea and economics, that John Nash was obsessed with one original idea. And it showed the scientists constantly in competition with one another, again, the small p politics, in an arms race themselves to be the first to the idea, be the first to take the theory into reality. And it's not I didn't articulate who cares. It was the hubris behind it all.
Yes.
That sort of took all of the moral checks and the ethical checks that did come along the way, where there would be a bit of doubt, and then the compartmentalization helped to sort of suppress all of that.
Like, someone else is going to do it. If I don't do it, like...
But the hubris, hubris was the driving it bulldozed all of the ethical and moral questions until, in the end, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I don't want to give away exactly how it's depicted in the film. Nolan made clear choices about it. I don't know if I exactly agree with how he chose to represent the two, but it is wildly powerful. I bawled my eyes out.
Yes.
Mainly because, I'm already very aware of what nuclear weapons do, what they are. I actually at one point was trained in how exactly they're built. I could do the math kind of thing. It was very complicated, but it was in order to understand the magnitude of the things that humans have built. But the kind of just pure chaos and destruction that this particular idea wrought on the world, and it's just something that in the film, there is a point where with Hiroshima and Nagasaki that will punch you in the gut.
Yeah.
One last thing, and I think this sort of dives deep into the points that you were making as well in terms of the small p politics amongst the players at hand, is that in the end, Nolan very cleverly with Oppenheimer and with another character, because I just don't want to go into details, between Oppenheimer and another character, there is mutually assured destruction between the two of them.
Yes. No. You need to spell this out.
And so mutually assured destruction is just a concept in nuclear warfare that says, and it's specifically between Russia and the United States, the two nuclear powers that hold the most warheads, weapons that can deliver the warheads, is that, say Russia fires at the United States will respond, and the two are so armed that we will destroy one another. It's mutually assured destruction, which is part of, it's something, the deterrence thing that you mentioned before that is mentioned in the film early on as a sort of like, hey, this is okay that we're doing this because actually this is going to bring peace through deterrence. Well, it's also peace through mutually assured destruction, that nobody wants to set off another bomb after Hiroshima and Nagasaki because we will all die.
Yeah.
Just to be frank. And in the film, Nolan, I think, just is so clear with Oppenheimer himself. I don't think that there's really redemption for him in the film. I see some people saying, oh, like it was morally complex. And I'm like, I don't think it was complex at all for Nolan. I think he pretty clearly stands on the side that Oppenheimer made some really poor choices. And by poor choices, he had blood on his hands. And then there's another character involved, but I'm not going to go deeper into it just because I know many listeners have not seen the film yet.
Yeah, but you did lean over to me, say the phrase mutually assured destruction, and I was like, yeah, I would not have thought of that, but that is exactly right. And I can't wait to read a quote where Christopher Nolan, refers to that. All right, let's move to Barbie.
Yeah, Barbie was super interesting. Very interesting following Oppenheimer. Michael and I, to be completely clear, we are Greta Gerwig fans. Greta Gerwig is the person who directed the film. She also directed Little Women 4 years ago and directed Lady Bird. So those are her two other really celebrated films. And I think she's just a director who's deeply earnest, is a beautiful screenplay writer. I think she understands a lot of the dynamics of women, the dynamics between mothers and daughters in profound ways. And so you and I are just very big fans of her. And so for her to have directed Barbie, which if you're like us, I went into Barbie having no idea what it was going to be about. The trailers were very opaque. And I today still can't decide whether or not I even liked the film. And that's not to say that I didn't think it was good. Oppenheimer, I think, hit me so hard and is just so embedded into my interests, the subject matter, that even Greta Gerwig could not overcome that. Even though everybody, if you felt like, oh, I think I'm going to see that, definitely go see it. Greta Gerwig has fantastic comedic writing. I mean, there are some parts in the film that were just
I think it's the funniest movie to come out in years.
Yes, the funniest movie to come out in years. Ryan Gosling as Ken is spectacular. He almost overdoes the character because he's so good at it. And it was refreshing. America Ferrera is in the film, and I won't say who she is and what part she plays, but she was also really refreshingly good. I haven't seen her in a lot. And the sets, I should say, and the costumes and all of the various supporting actors, I felt was super interesting and well done. And then, there is a really great review out right now at Vox from Melissa Wilkinson, one of our favorite film critics. And she gave a great Oppenheimer review. You should go definitely read that. But her Barbie review talks about how she thinks that the film follows Genesis, but in sort of on its head type ways. And I think that review is really insightful for the film. And I absolutely felt it while watching it.
And Greta basically said as much.
Greta basically said as much. Now, one of the other reasons why you and I like Greta Gerwig is that she has a ton of religious motifs in her film.
Yes.
And she grew up religious. She grew up Unitarian Universalist, and she brings that in. And she also has had a lot of experiences with other sort of sects of Christianity. And, in a New York Times piece just this past week, she talked about her friend who was Jewish and how her friend's father would bless her at the table, and like how profound that was to her and how it relates to the film. And so I really love that Gerwig handles, again, kind of like The Bear, handles religion in deeply respectful, profound, complex, very just sort of visceral ways. And Barbie somehow is one of those films where she's able to do it again, which was very surprising to me. Did you like the film? What do you think?
I did. I liked it. I thought some of the I thought some of the politics felt outdated and
Yes.
just like trying
Yes.
felt some of the little political throwaway lines felt beneath Greta.
Yes.
I do think there's a self-consciousness in the film that this is a Mattel, this is a corporate prompted movie. And so basically, for those who don't know, Mattel, this is the first in what will be a series of movies that are focused based off of Mattel IP. And so Mattel really wooed Greta Gerwig to do this. No, Greta insists that she had creative control, but they also discuss like that there were conversations and that Mattel executives pushed back on some parts and some concessions were made, others were not. And I feel like there's a self-consciousness through the movie that does that. I felt like some of the political lines were trying to like make up for that.
Yes, I agree.
And I think lacked some of the depth of what we know Greta is capable of in terms of, at least on the surface of sort of political and cultural commentary.
But here's the thing, is if, things had to be written the way that they were written, I wouldn't want anybody else but Greta Gerwig to deliver it, because she did her best, and you could tell, kind of thing.
No, so I want to be clear. I think it deserves awards. I think it's a best screenplay nominee and probably winner.
Yeah.
I think it is such a...
It's clever.
Clever, surprising, deep take. It was interesting. I thought the mother-daughter angle was going to be like the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Like that would be typically how it would go.
Yes,
and
right.
instead, it basically closes the first act.
Yes.
And she had something bigger she wanted to say. Although I will say, if you're a parent, particularly a parent of girls, you will 100% cry during this movie.
Yeah,
like
closing
100%.
of Act 1 got me. Man. Yes, because again, I think Greta Gerwig is probably probably the most masterful director out there when it comes to mother-daughter relationships.
Yeah.
Bar none. It's basically her magnum opus, I think, that sort of covers her career.
Yeah. So I really liked the movie. I thought that it was life affirming, as all of Greta's work is.
Yes, and one of the things that I said last night was, while Christopher Nolan's film was about the denigration of ideas, or the consequences, or the destruction of ideas, the destruction that ideas can have, is that this film, Barbie, is definitely a celebration of ideas. So to actually have them marketed together was kind of hilarious in that way, because you have one and the other sort of happening. And I felt like the marketing around Barbie was one of the wildest things I've ever seen. I have never seen marketing so penetrating in my life. I see Barbie everywhere, teamed up with like hundreds of brands. They've built entire homes out in California that are Barbie dream homes. And so I think that that's something that needs to be talked about a bit more. And then I do think that the previews that we saw with both films were fascinating to me, because you and I don't really go to the movies a lot anymore because COVID happened and children happened. And I used to really look forward to...
Two very different things.
Yes.
It's not... she means those in two very different ways.
So before both of those things happened, previews, trailers used to be one of my favorite things about going to the movies, because especially if you would see a big blockbuster or one of the films that you know was most likely going to be up for at least an Oscar or two, it would always come with fantastic trailers. And I felt like the trailers were lacking before either movie. And then with this strike happening with writers and some actors, and we know that a bunch of stuff is about to be delayed for several years, I kept on thinking to myself that we're about to hit a dearth possibly of the culture making that happens out in Hollywood and in filmmaking and TV making elsewhere. That makes me a bit nervous.
At least we have Dune 2 to look forward to.
At least we have Dune 2.
We know
correct.
Dune 2 is going to come out. Yeah.
But I do think that Barbie and Oppenheimer coming out in this time in summer of 2023 signals, I think, a few things about how people are feeling culturally and socially. Where with the UK, you know, I went back and listened to our episode 11 on nuclear war with Tyler Rick Stevenson, and it was a week after the Ukraine war started. And, you know, the first 3 to 4 weeks of the Ukraine war last year in 2022, a lot of the conversation was around, wait, hold up. The United States has how many nuclear weapons, and Russia has how many, and Russia might use nuclear weapons in Ukraine? What does that mean? Who would die? Would this spread into Europe? Like, you had people thinking about nukes again. That it's interesting that Oppenheimer has come out this year and people thinking about that kind of destruction, whereas Barbie is also kind of reflective of like a big cultural icon, also from around similar times that Oppenheimer actually takes place in, because the original Barbie was created like decades ago and during a very different time, and Barbie used to represent, you know, a certain kind of thing and has evolved throughout the years, and that's kind of what the Barbie film is about. I think these kinds of reflections on these ideas from the 40s, 50s, and 60s coming out now at a time of a lot of political, social, cultural upheaval is interesting to me. I don't have fully formed thoughts on that, and I don't know if I've been clear at all with the opener I've just given. But do you have thoughts towards that, Michael, before we end?
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I think the fact that they were released together, it's like a brief survey of the wreckage of the 20th century. Two very different takes in very different
yes.
ways, but the sort of curdling that took place in the 20th century, there was the idea heading into the 20th century that we had finally gotten beyond religion and religious wars, and because of that, like, we were on the brink of peace. And then World War I happened, and World War II, as Oppenheimer covers, there was this idea that sort of in the post-World War II institution building, and really you could think of the nuke as a kind of institution, like that these were all going to be supporting structures of peace. And of course we look back and see just how foolish that was, and how foolish some of the idealistic technocratic thinking of the 20th century was. And then you look at Barbie, and I think the tension of the movie, and it opens up with this idea that Barbie, at least in Greta's telling, like, Barbie announced this sort of liberation of women, and of course we look back on that as Barbie as liberatory, and see how foolish that was. And so it's just very interesting that the nuke was supposed to be so powerful that war would be ended. Barbie was supposed to be this sort of symbol of women's lib. And we now sit at a time where Me Too, all the concerns about young girls and their self-image and self-esteem and depression, etc., and the nuke actually paralyzing the U.S. from being able to act to defend Ukraine more directly because of this concern that it will lead to nuclear war. So like the lies of both eras, the lies of both products, for lack of a better term, we now know that they were not true to varying degrees. You're right, Melissa. Like Greta kind of holds out hope that like the experiment hasn't like with Barbie hasn't gone perfectly.
Yes.
But she expresses this like kind of hope that like maybe as we evolve, Barbie will evolve too, and like that kind of thing. It's more dire with Oppenheimer.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that there is definitely something to that.
And this will make sense once you see Barbie, because I don't want to get into a spoiler here, but there is compartmentalization in Barbie as well that happens.
Yes.
That leads the actually overflows into actually creating destruction.
Oh, that's the whole movie.
Yeah. No, but now that I put together what you've said about Oppenheimer, I'm like, wait, the exact same thing happened. What did they create these movies together? Like, why were we marketed them together? Who started that? I'm suspicious.
This is my new take. They are what holds them together is how mid 20th century zeitgeist they are.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think they are both commentaries and critiques of that World War II, post-World War II period. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. Well, hey, you need to see both these movies, I think. I mean, well, look, if they're not for you, they're not for you. So I don't want to... If they're for you, you need to see both these movies. They're both worth seeing. And then we want to hear what you thought of them. So again, reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Melissa, we're going to New York.
We are.
We're going to see some shows.
Yep. We're going to eat a lot of Italian food, a lot of pastries.
We're going to the Bronx. We've never done that. We've never done like the Little Italy of the Bronx. And I'm very excited about that. And should be a good time. All right, friends. Thanks for listening. This has been a cultural episode of Where We Are. We'll be back with you next week.
Bye.
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go again, but you ain't picking your